and welcome to another live chapter reading of Rebecca Steele, Living the Dream by Joanne Patterson, as presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Franklin, Tennessee. In a suburb of Nashville called Franklin, I hugged my new husband as the sun started to come up. Chance opened one eye and kissed my neck. "What woke you up, Becky?" he said softly. "Emily, in the kitchen," I answered, rubbing his shoulders. He reached for me, but the noises coming from making coffee were too distracting. Emily lived with us when Justin, her boyfriend, was out on country music tours. If he had been home, she would have been with him in his trailer over by the bunkhouse, and it would have been quiet at our house. Cassidy had heard the racket and knocked on our door. Chance yelled, "Come on in, Cass." Our 5-year-old daughter bounded into the room and jumped onto the bed. We all hugged each other, and I then forced myself to get up and get dressed so I could take her to school. Chance had been awarded full custody of his precious child in family court. I had become a stepmommy, and I loved her to pieces. The kids at school called her Cassie, and she asked if Chance and I would call her Cassie too. We both agreed, of course. Meanwhile, Emily poured us each a cup of coffee and remarked on the noise outside. A contractor and his crew were laying the foundation for our log cabin. It was down the road a piece, but close enough that we could watch the progress. I had searched all the magazines online and finally decided what the cabin would look like. Chance let me make all the decisions and trusted my judgment. It was freeing to have a good man who trusted me and exciting not to have to worry about money. The huge inheritance from Danny, my first husband, was substantial enough to take care of anything we could possibly ever want or need. After she downed her coffee, Emily flew out the door to start her day working at the Dude Ranch building next to the main house up the road. "See you later, Becky. Don't forget, we're having lunch. I sent you a text." "I won't forget, Emily," I answered. "Have a nice morning." I looked out the window at the beautiful daisies planted everywhere and watched as Emily walked up onto the porch and entered the Dude Ranch great room through the sliding doors. Out on the back, my 3 horses, Skipper, Missy, and Christy, were in a big pasture munching on grass. It was a beautiful sight with the mountains in the background. Everything was peaceful and serene. This was such a special time of the year at our ranch, as springtime brought the foaling season. Ryan was very busy watching the mares and making sure everything was moving along smoothly. Very soon, there would be foals running alongside their mamas. I loved this time of year. The babies were precious and so much fun to watch grow up. Marty, who gave Emily and me our jobs on the ranch after we retired from the airlines, was getting into his truck by the main house to go into Nashville, to the Hummingbird Cafe. He loved working with all the songwriters who frequented the cafe. The ranch paid the bills, but the most fun we all had was at the Hummingbird. We were all one big, happy family. Chapter 2. Cassie was calling to me. "Becky, Becky, help!" She was frantic because she couldn't decide what to wear to school. We chose a 2-piece denim short set with a light blue t-shirt. She looked adorable. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Chance was on his phone, talking to his mom about Cassie's mother, Carrie, who was getting out of rehab from a drug overdose. His parents lived up off the main road about 5 minutes away. Carrie would be coming to visit soon, and she always stayed with them. The judge had awarded her supervised visits with her daughter while she was here. I wasn't looking forward to having to deal with her. Carrie was not happy that Chance and I had gotten married. She always thought Chance, and she called him Adam, his birth name, would go back to her and be a family with Cassie. Chance proved he wasn't going back to her when he married me. We were very much in love, and he wasn't going to let her interfere. This didn't stop her, however, from trying to start trouble every time she was here. She never gave up. I had to insist that Cassie eat some breakfast, at least some toast with peanut butter and jelly. After a few mouthfuls, she grabbed her pink backpack and announced she was ready for school. She led the way to my shiny new car. I had splurged a little with the inheritance money from Danny and bought a white Subaru Outback. I loved this car. It was so much fun to drive. Cassie was all excited because her class was going on a field trip to the zoo, and she could spend some time with her best friend, Harper Sue. These two reminded me of Emily and me when we were youngsters. They were joined at the hip, and I hoped their friendship would last as long as Emily's and mine had. Cassie was talking about Harper's pony, Popsicle, and how Harper's mom said they couldn't afford to keep her anymore. Cassie asked me if we could take care of her pony. She could stay in the barn with Lollipop, Cassie's pony. She had it all figured out and knew I would say yes to her plan. We will talk about it when you come home from school, I told her. I knew that Harper's mom was a single mother, but didn't realize money was so tight. They lived about a mile up the road and didn't have much room or money for a pony. Of course I would help her out. This would mean Harper would spend some more time at the ranch, and this would make Cassie very happy. Chapter 3. Cassie was full of information this morning, and she talked all the way to school about her riding lessons on Lollipop. She was becoming quite the little rider. She had wanted to ride in the rodeos with her father and me. I felt that she wasn't quite ready, but it wouldn't be much longer. Emily and I would have to buy her some new rodeo duds. She wanted everything to be sparkly and white, except for her cowboy boots. She still wanted red ones, like mine. She asked if Harper Sue could take lessons too. She was way ahead of me. I said, "Your mother is feeling better and will be visiting soon. How do you feel about that?" Cassie made a face and asked if she had to see her. "Do I have to, Becky? I don't want to." I told her she could talk to her father about it. She opened the car door, said goodbye, while giving me a quick hug and ran up the sidewalk to her school. She was very well adjusted and happy, and I hoped that her mother's being here wouldn't cause any of that to change. We had never told her that her mom overdosed on opium and almost died. For some reason, I found myself thinking about the clowns at the festival in Memphis last year. They were very frightening and followed me everywhere. I still wondered if Carrie had something to do with that craziness. If I ever see another one, it'll be too soon. Marty had already mentioned going to the festival again this year, and I was lined up to perform. I would have a set of 3 songs instead of just one. My career was moving up. I still sang at the Hummingbird Cafe on the weekends whenever I could. It helped Marty to have me there, and it was the least I could do after all he had done for me. The crowds always spilled out into the parking lot, so he would just leave the outside speakers hooked up all the time. The sign was already installed across the street for the 2nd annual concert series in the park. Tentatively, the lineup included Old Dominion, Thomas Rhett, Florida Georgia Line, and Carl Pierce. The series was shortened because Marty had scheduling problems booking the performers. Emily met me at the Trick Pony for lunch. It was very crowded for a weekday. There must have been a country music fans touring the area. She was all concerned because Justin was out on tour and she knew there would be women all over him. I tried to reason with her. "There's nothing you can do, Emily. That's how it is when you date a famous singer." Justin's career as a country music entertainer was taking off like a shot. He was booked most weekends now and had to have a bodyguard when he was away from Nashville. He was definitely popular with the ladies. We knew this would happen the first time we saw him. Emily mentioned the age difference between them. "I don't mean to be insensitive, I said. "But I suppose at some point he will want to be with someone his own age. 20 years is a big spread." She looked like somebody shot her. "How can you say that, Becky, even though I know you're right? I know he'll want a family someday." I told her just to take one day at a time and enjoy what they have now. I had always been concerned that Justin would turn out just like his father, Johnny, a playboy from the word go. Speaking of Johnny, Emily almost forgot to tell me that she had received a message from him that morning. He was calling from jail and looking for Justin. He had no idea his son was on a huge tour with Tim McGraw. Emily knew Justin would be home later that night and told Johnny she could relay the message. I wanted to know about the message. It was none of my business for sure, but I was curious. Emily told me Johnny needed a ride from jail to the ranch. He wanted to come to talk to Marty and planned to plead with him to give him his job back. "Oh no," I said to her. I'm going to tell Marty not to hire him again. Emily told me not to be so mean. Emily left Justin a voicemail telling him to pick up his father at the Nashville jail at 7:30 the next morning. Chapter 4. The next day, Johnny was waiting when Justin arrived at the jail. Justin insisted on hearing the whole story about what happened, and don't leave anything out. They went to a small diner a few streets from the music row, hoping they wouldn't run into anyone they knew. Johnny explained how he just lost it when he found out I was going to marry the big cowboy. He stole some money from Marty and acted like a real jerk. He wanted to cause a slight disturbance at the first concert in the park, but things got out of hand. Justin's eyes were fixated on him as he heard the story of a real bomb in a duffel bag. "How did you get out if you were sentenced to 10 years?" he asked, shaking his head. Johnny explained, "I had a decent court-appointed lawyer who argued that the explosives were not dangerous and wouldn't have hurt anyone even if the bomb had gone off, which it didn't. The judge took into account my military background and let me go with a stern warning not to get into any trouble, or I would just go back to jail for a long time." Chapter 5. We had Dude Ranch guests signed up for a morning trail ride. Because I was so busy, I almost didn't notice a pickup truck coming down the driveway. Inside were two men. One was wearing a cowboy hat. The truck stopped at the main house and both men got out, went up the steps, and knocked on the door. There was something familiar about them, and I was trying to figure out who they were. One looked like Justin. I heard Marty laugh, and then I knew I had to see what was going on. I yelled for the ranch hand, Ryan, to come help with the horses and walked up to the main house. I still couldn't see who the men were. Chance had gone to his mother's house to talk about Casey's mom coming to visit. He would be back momentarily. There was a funny feeling in my stomach as I saw the two men walk over to the bunkhouse and shake hands with Ryan. Marty was close behind. They all turned to look at me as I approached the barn. Oh my God, it felt like I was going to faint or throw up. The men were father and son, Johnny and Justin. Marty came over and protectively put his arm around me. I said, much louder than was necessary, "What the hell are you doing here?" I glared at Johnny. Marty said calmly, "Now, it's okay, Becky, no harm done. He's not going to start any trouble. He's going to be working here again." I shook my head. It was like he just forgave him for all the stuff he pulled. Cassie heard the commotion and came running from the barn. She was so happy to see Johnny and ran to him and hugged him around his legs. He picked her up and gave her a big hug in return. Johnny, are you going to live here?" Cassie asked, very excited. I guess I had never paid attention to how close these two were. He told her no, but he would soon be sure to see her a lot. She said, "Okay, come back soon," hugged his legs again, and ran back to the barn. Her main focus was on her pony. However, there was certainly a strange connection between Cassie and Johnny that I could not ignore. I was so relieved when I saw Chance coming down the driveway. I walked toward him and reached for his hand. Marty introduced everyone. Chance, the gentleman that he was, shook hands and told Johnny, "I'm glad you're out of jail." I pulled Chance toward his truck, hopped in with him, and left Johnny with Marty. I told Chance I would talk to Marty and make sure Johnny didn't live anywhere near close by. Marty had a kind heart, but I was adamant about this. "Wait till Emily hears the news," I said to myself. I sent her a text message and told her to come home. I caught her just as she was pulling into the driveway at her mom's. She went to the house and told her mom she'd be back, that something was up at the ranch and she had to go check it out. Chapter 6. Marty had been insistent that I go on tour this year. He was the best manager and was always looking out for my career. When possible, we would drive together to the concerts, but Chance and I would fly when we had to. Julie was my trusted personal assistant, would come with us as often as possible. Marty would have to figure out the schedules for the band and backup singers. He had recently decided that he and Dixie were going to spend a couple weeks every month away from the ranch and from the Hummingbird Cafe too. They would be going to the Hilton Head Island to stay at their house on the ocean. This meant he had to find people to fill in for him in Nashville while he was away. Things were certainly changing. Chance and I drove into Nashville to see the new concert sign and hoped Johnny would be gone by the time we got back. I noticed a for rent sign on a house a few blocks from Chance's parents' house. I wrote down the phone number in case Johnny decided to stay in Nashville. By the time we returned to the ranch, the truck was gone and things were pretty quiet. Marty had gone into Nashville, so I would have to wait to talk to him. Emily was already back and she had just missed seeing Johnny. She was surprised that he was out of jail, but thought all along he got a bum deal. She, of course, wondered where Justin was. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Good night.